everyone, welcome to Survive This Crit, where we combine our love for horror movies and RPGs to take an adventure into some of the universe's most famous monsters. I'm your final girl, Kylie.
And I'm your final guy, Nick.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 3. Today, we are actually interviewing each other. I'm your final girl, Kylie, as mentioned in the intro, and this is, drumroll please,
your final guy, Nick.
Ka-chow.
Ka-chow. So for this section, we want to reserve it specifically for interviewing guests, but since this is our first episode, we thought it might be useful to maybe interview each other, just to give you, our listeners, a bit more background on us. I'm sure you got enough in the previous ones, but, it could always be nice to get a little bit more. Just see what's going on currently in our lives.
Yeah.
I believe the title for this one, Kylie, you can tell me if you want to change the name a bit, but I thought my idea for the name for this section was a little fun. Pester the Guest.
I like that. Let's go. Pester the Guest.
Okay. So I'll go first with the first question here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What is your least favorite horror trope and why?
Okay, so I wrote this question and it always takes me a minute. I think my least favorite horror trope is really cheap jump scares. Because it may just be because I'm biased and it scares the crap out of me every time. I am a very, very jumpy person. Like Joshua and I went to a couple haunted houses in October, and he would literally just like pull my arm and I would lose my mind. It would scare me so bad. So I would say I don't like cheap jump scares because it feels like a really easy way to get a reaction out of your audience when there are a lot of other, like for example, the ending of Nightmare on Elm Street, it leaves you feeling uneasy and uncertain and it makes you think about it for days. But if you have scenes like, I don't know, Insidious or The Conjuring, where they just have like a little at some point, that just like, it gets my heart racing. And I don't like it. So that is my least favorite trope.
I can understand. I have more of a love-hate relationship with that stuff. Because on one hand, I'm a little bit of, not like a major one, I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. So when you get that little jump scare, I'm just like you will always see like a smile on my face. Well, a weird combination of a smile and of like horror. Where I'm just like, I love it. Because like I remember specifically it was either The Conjuring or The Nun, where you see the painting. Yeah, it's probably The Conjuring then. You see the painting of the nun, and then out of nowhere, the actual nun is standing right in front of the painting, and the character just doesn't quite realize it yet. I just like freak out. I'm like, oh. Or what was it? You see a lot of that in the Paranormal Activity movies, which was another start for me for the horror film stuff. Oh my goodness, like that was just full of jump scares.
Gosh,
and you're right, it is kind of cheap. Like it's a cheap way to formatically, appeal to the people looking for exactly what I described it, the adrenaline rush.
Yeah, it's like an editing choice where they're like, gonna get you here, whether you like it or not. But I mean, I get it. Because it works. It works on most people, but I don't like it as a trope. And that's probably because I react very strongly, whereas you react like a little bit more courageously than I do. But what's your least favorite horror trope?
Mine would have to be probably, we were talking about it in the previous episode a bit, when you can't really see the monster or see the thing you're facing.
Yeah.
That one is a tough one to do. And sometimes you have your movies where the thing you're facing is invisible, like a ghost or an invisible man or something like that. And I'll forgive those ones because, like, again, I was saying, like, Paranormal Activity, like I still actually like those movies as a kid. Um, but you can't see Toby. You never see Toby.
Hmm.
Uh, so there's a little bit of mystery to it. But overall, when you actually have a monster that you've gone to the length of, someone going into makeup and sitting through hours of that, or even throwing tons of money at like a CGI thing, and then you either in an attempt to save money or for whatever reason, you hide the monster in the dark.
Mm.
There can be times where it's good. There are some classic movie examples with lighting where it creates more of this emotion. Um, but nowadays, it seems like those tropes where your monster's hiding in the dark, they just kind of cheapen the effect. They cheapen what should be the centerpiece of your horror film, which is your monster, your thing you're facing.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that. I think there are some films, like you said, we talked about last episode, like Friday the 13th is a great example of a character that you don't really see toward the end, but the reveal is almost worth it, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say I'm kind of in the same boat as you there, where if you're hiding the villain the whole time, I have a hard time getting on board with that because I'd rather know what the characters are facing, even if it's done in the way that Nightmare on Elm Street was done, where it's like the lighting is done in a way where you can see him, but you really can't make him out super clearly, and he's just a very grotesque character to look at.
Mm. And you know what? Now that I think about it a bit more, I can't think of a specific example of this. One
Mm-hmm.
thing I know I definitely don't like is when your monster is hiding in the shadows and they have tentacles or something, some type of tendril, and it just pops out of the shadows, just the tentacles, and drags whoever into the shadows. Like that, to me, is the worst offense.
I thought of like three movies and or shows that do that, and I don't know which is right, so I'm going to refrain myself from saying. But do you just have an octopus phobia? Is like tentacles was very specific.
No, tentacles is more of an example. It's just the first thing that came to mind.
Okay, so it could be arms, it could be like anything pulling a character in the shadows.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because yeah, no, I don't have an octopus phobia. That no. But that sense of like again hiding your creature
Mm-hmm.
in the darkness instead only giving us a small fraction of it. Just especially if we never end up really seeing the monster,
Yeah.
even towards the end, it just sort of it cheapens it. It cheapens it a little bit. That's sometimes my criticisms, like with the Godzilla movies, is that like you don't always get to, at least not like some of the more recent ones, I guess.
Mm.
Not the you know what I mean? Like, and maybe Godzilla's the wrong example here, but when you have your big monster and you
Mm-hmm.
only get to see a foot or you get to see their eyeball and you don't really get to see the entire monster in a single frame.
Yeah.
That to me just kind of like it's sort
That's
of
that's like your previous, like your initial trope point where you're like, I don't like when we can't see the monster. That's
exactly.
why I kept referencing Jason, because like you see Jason or Mrs. Voorhees' legs throughout the original Friday 13th, and you're like, who is this? Or you just see the camera motioning as if they're them.
Mhm.
But I agree with you. I would like to be able to see the villain more, which is why my favorite is Scream, which is another Wes Craven film,
Oh
because
yeah.
the villains are there the whole time. They are, spoiler alert, they are a part of the general population, which is why I think that movie is so well done.
Mhm.
And it's based on like I don't think that one's based on a true story, but
And that was also one of the first, maybe not the first. Obviously we'll have to do more research whenever we touch on it, but certainly the one that gets attributed the most with blatantly pointing out and taking this kind of meta approach to other horror films, assigning rules
yeah.
to horror movies, pointing it out. Um, it's definitely something that gave me a sort of crash course into, oh, this is what you probably expect in other horror movies.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, there's a whole character that his like character description is pointing out horror tropes as they're living in the horror movie, which is, I think, was a really fun, like you said, meta way to approach it, which I'm not normally one for meta, but I really enjoy that film. What's your favorite horror film?
My favorite horror film of all time?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a tough one. Uh, Instinctively, I do want to say this movie is one of my favorites.
Okay,
I
I
don't,
like that. Nightmare on Elm Street, number one.
but for the sake of intrigue, let me pick a different one for you. Um, I'm gonna say probably. Oof. See, now my mind's just drawing a blank here. I'm gonna go with the first Paranormal Activity.
Oh, okay. I've
You
not
know, that one I
actually.
still. It's another one where it's like I have fond memories of it. It's not necessarily the best done movie, and again, it has all those cheap jump scares. But I remember the concept really sticking with me a lot throughout my younger years.
Okay.
Uh, was it just waking up sometimes in cold sweats, being like, "There's something hiding in the shadows. It's invisible, and it's watching me sleep."
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I don't. I've actually never seen paranormal activity, and I probably won't unless we do it for this podcast because I do have a healthy fear of things in the spiritual realm that are I don't want to mess with. I don't necessarily want to put it on my screen. So I
Well,
have kudos to you for watching it, but ugh.
part of it too that really stuck with me prominently. I remember it was the previous home I was living in, and I think it was because my room was right next to the. I want to say it was probably the heating unit. It was something. It was some unit stuck in a very small closet, and my room was right next to it. And I swear there was. I try not to be a supernatural type of person, or I try and take things more logically. But there are some things I just have such a hard time explaining, and there are some examples in my life, or rather in the lives of people I know that go through stuff that I just can't explain. And so I just remember distinct times of like being in this house, and I swear it maybe it was that heating unit next to my room, but it
Mhm.
sounded like I could hear footsteps going on in, in the middle of the night, and it kept me up. Or I swear, I think I've told you this once before. I felt like when I was trying to sleep, sometimes there was something tugging at my pillow.
Yep, I do remember that. We've had that.
And
Uh,
it could probably all be summed up in paranoia. But the fact is that every time I felt those, I always went back in my mind to the Paranormal Activity movies. And so the fact is that when those movies stay prominent in your mind, it that to me defines like that those should be your favorites,
mm,
whether you have criticisms of them or not. To me, again, the best horror movies are the ones that really stick with you and they keep you thinking about them. And so that's why Paranormal Activity is probably one of my favorites.
yeah, you're braver than me because I definitely am not as logical as you. I do believe that there are goops and gokes that live in a different realm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we just lost about our 1 out of 2 listeners that we had because of that. But that's why, like, I don't mess around with paranormal movies for that reason.
Mhm.
But that is impressive that you're able to do it and still sleep at night. So I do want to ask though, are you a fight, flight, or freeze in a situation of confrontation?
I want to say I genuinely want to be a fight. I love the idea of being a hero,
Mm,
but and I still have an example. So I will always probably say I'm probably more of a flight person, only
okay.
because I have a specific example from my childhood I can always point to in order to humble myself. I remember I was sitting in, or not sitting, I was at a Boy Scout camp, and one tradition we always like to do on one of the last few nights is me and the rest of my troop would sneak out in the middle of the night and we go play some pranks on the camp. We go like take streamers and throw them up on the flagpole, stuff like that. Your classic vandalism. Um,
Classic juvenile vandalism.
exactly. And I remember, so it was so dark I could barely see anything, and I saw this shadow creeping up towards me, and it kind of looked like a wolf. And I was with my friends. I was just standing there with my friends, and I see this shadowy figure approach us. And immediately, without saying anything, whatever, I just turned around and started power walking a bit. And then, like maybe 30 feet out, I looked back and I see no one else is moving. And I'm like, what the heck? And everyone's kind of just standing there. I'm like, get the sense, like, okay, I think everyone's staring at me. I walk back. I realized, oh, it was my friend Norm.
Norm, who gave a hilarious toast at your wedding.
Yes.
Let's give a shout out to Norm there.
Yeah. So I will always kind of, as much as I want to be the fight guy, I will probably always point back at that moment in my life and humble myself and be like, no, Nick, you're probably more of a flight. As much as you don't want to be, you probably are.
I think for me, I would say I land somewhere between a fight and a freeze for the most part. Because as a kid, like I definitely was the one that would like if someone was accusing me of something that I didn't do, I would call them out for it. Like one time some kid in middle school called me the B word when we were playing basketball on the court. Now I like definitely called him out for that. I was like, "Are you serious? Does your vocabulary not allow you to have anything better to say? That's the best that you can come up with." And like very similarly, when I got a referral in first grade, it was all because a girl tried to get me to play with her when I was playing with somebody else. And I told her, I was like, I don't want to play with you right now. I'm playing with this other girl. And then she accused me of cussing her out with cuss words I didn't even know at the time. So
probably blacked out.
I would say in my
your alter ego probably took over and cussed her out and you just didn't realize it.
Probably. But I would say in my close, intimate relationships with people that I really care about, I will occasionally freeze because I don't want to hurt them and I don't know how to approach the situation. So that's where I would say I fall on that spectrum.
Okay, so what is something that you watched recently and that you love? Doesn't have to be a horror movie. Anything that you watched recently and you loved it.
Okay. Do you want to go first or do you want me to?
You go first.
Well, I recently finished the Wednesday series. I honestly was very, very hesitant to watch it because I am a fan of the black and white television show, as well as the movies with Christina Ricci in them. And I will say it definitely blew me away. It was so worth watching. You could really see Tim Burton's directorial preferences really shine in those first few episodes. And Joshua and I flew through that show. We watched it so fast. And actually, my very first job in the entertainment industry that I had was in the talent management and casting field. And one of the clients that the talent manager I worked for was one of the main cast members. At the time, I don't know if they're still repped by them, so I'm not going to say anything about who it was, but I do remember seeing that person's face and being like, oh, I remember them like 4 years ago when they were just starting out. So that was really cool from a nostalgic and personal point of view for me. Um, but what about you? What have you been watching?
Well, so it's officially after Thanksgiving, so most of my content, or most of my, not content, I always hear nowadays, content is a horrible term to
Influencer.
use. Most of what I consume entertainment wise is basically Christmas stuff.
Okay.
Christmas stuff nonstop.
Nice.
I make it a point to almost do nonstop Christmas stuff. I'll take a couple breaks, but it's like an endurance run for me.
Hmm.
How much Christmas stuff can I take in between Thanksgiving and the actual Christmas day? So, one of the things it's a rewatch for me. I fell in love with it a few years ago when it first came out on Netflix, and I find myself always wanting to go back to it since. It's called El Camino Christmas, and
Okay. I've not seen it. What's it about?
so it's a movie about a man who never knew his father, and he goes. His mother recently passes away, and he goes in search of his estranged father, and he ends up in this white trash town, so very small, where population of just to make up a small number here, 200. It, it feels more like 20, but
Okay. Feels like 20. Could be 200. Could be 2000.
who knows? Anyway, he goes in search of his father and ends up being accused under false pretenses of ownership of marijuana. And I know.
Yes.
And all the cops in the movie are not the smartest bunch. And they see a bottle of Drano in the back of his car, and they think, "Oh, he's bringing drugs into our town. He's got the Drano. He's probably making meth. Let's arrest him." And yeah, some of them do have some bad accents,
That
but
was that was a pretty good accent. I will give you that. Good bad.
no, I'm saying the actors have some
Oh,
pretty
okay.
bad accents. But the point is it all kind of goes sideways from there as this guy tries to clear his name. Now, I won't say exactly what happens, obviously, I won't spoil it. But one of the things I do love about the movie is one thing I will always appreciate in a Christmas movie is when it decides to go the more emotional route and
Mm.
talk about like I'm a little bit of a sucker. I'll say I'm a little bit of a sucker for drama stuff. So when a Christmas movie decides to be dramatic, decides to instead of focus on your campiest stuff of here's Santa and the North Pole, but instead talks about Christmas is such a hard time for me because so and so passed around this time of year and I gotta find a way to get over that. I'm a bit of a sucker for that type of stuff.
Okay.
So
I can
that's
respect
the type
that.
of vibes this movie kind of gave off. And what was it? Tim Allen is in it. He's probably one of my favorite actors. Not my favorite, but he decides to put himself in some different things
Yeah.
that that makes him of intrigue to me. Kind of like a sort of like a Nicolas Cage effect of sorts.
That just reminded me of the episode of Community where they're trying to decide if Nicolas Cage is a good actor. And that
Oh,
just
I don't.
we can debate on that another day. I
Yeah,
just
I don't know about that. I know for a fact the man just will take any project on. So you know
pretty
your
impressive.
whatever your opinion is of that, take it or leave it. But yeah, I would say so that's something that I watched recently and that I loved. El Camino Christmas.
All right. I like that. So I know because you can't necessarily say in detail what you do for a living, but do you want to give like 3 words to describe what you do for a living?
Uh, I am a software engineer, and one thing I've been working on recently was, what? I had to really face my fear of public speaking this week, which was very tough. I don't have a
Oh,
big fear. Like, I will definitely go and give a presentation if I have to, but I will have to rehearse it over and over again. just so that way, because I know every time I go up and talk, if it's not a crowd of people that I'm comfortable talking with, I will, for a fact, feel some type of nerves that will debilitate me from being able to talk about whatever is up on that PowerPoint slide.
Mhm.
So, something I was really working on this week was just practicing this presentation over and over again to our customers of what it is I'm actually working on that I probably should not talk about.
And that is the only amount of detail that you have to go into. But I'm really proud that you got over your fear of public speaking. Oh,
Uh, I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't call it fear, or no, no, sorry. I wouldn't call it conquering more than just like I survived this time.
you survived.
There was
You're a
definitely
final
a
guy.
moment you would love this. There was a moment where I'm always very critical of myself and how I give presentations. So
Hmm.
anytime anyone gives me a compliment, I'm like, "You're lying through your teeth. Don't you dare tell me that I did a good job." Because I'll count my head the number of times I say or you know,
Really? You can keep track?
not like no, not like a specific number. If I had to guess, I probably did maybe about five of them in my
Okay.
10-minute presentation that I did.
That's not
But what
bad
really
for
got me was that there was one where I went for like a solid 5 seconds. I was like, Nick, in my mind, I'm like, Nick, you idiot, you practiced this for so long. And what really got me was that, and none of my coworkers said that they witnessed this, but I know what I felt.
uh-huh.
My right leg started to twitch at the beginning of my presentation, and I had to like really like grind my teeth and just be like, Nick, stop it right now. What are you doing? You practiced this. You can do it.
I used to have my leg used to tremor whenever I'd have to do a monologue or a musical piece in school. And it would drive me crazy because I would think everybody else could see it, but no one else could except for me. And I could feel it. It made me feel like my whole body was vibrating. But a really good book I read recently called Psycho-Cybernetics talked about how you have to change the perception in your mind, the perspective of you're going to have adrenaline no matter what, but it's up to you to interpret it as nerves or excitement. Because the excitement is going to power you through to do crazy things like lift a car off of a woman who's dying or something crazy instead of letting it take you down and letting it damage you. Actually, our somewhat mutual friend, Sam Snyder, lent me that book, and it was amazing to say the least. So next time you're in a situation where you feel the leg tremors or the nerves, remind yourself that it's actually excitement. It is not nerves, because you can change that.
Thank you for that motivational talk.
You're welcome. And
I'll remember that though. That's an interesting point. I'm always a big believer of matters of perspective. So I can see what you're talking about.
I got you. That's what I'm here for. Um, well, I will wrap this part up. I work in film and TV. My background, I started as an actor. I transitioned into talent management and then into casting a little bit and background casting after that. I started my own business and I'm on the track of producing because that is my primary interest, producing, especially with short form content, especially in the kids entertainment arena. So who knows exactly what's going to happen next, but that's the track I'm on. And because Nick and I were debating about this earlier, the last question we will ask for the day will be, do you wear shoes in your house?
Well, I'm always one to think that there are exceptions to the rule, but in general, no, you do not wear shoes in your house because your shoes are for outside. You're wearing your shoes outside regardless, and that means things are stuck to the bottom of your shoes, whether it be something obvious like gum or dirt. I don't want that tracked to my house. You take your shoes off. If you're a guest in my house, I won't tell you to because I want to be polite. But if you live in my house, I'm like, no.
That's fair. That's fair. I also would like to believe I'm that strict, but I'm definitely not. I have a place where I take my shoes off when I first come in, but because I knew we were doing this tonight, for whatever reason, I kept my shoes on to be like, I'm in work mode. I'm not quite in relaxed mode yet. So I would say for the most part, I have a similar standard, but because we live in a multi-story house, some shoes are on different floors, and sometimes like it's easier to put shoes on one floor and then walk up or downstairs. And also we have dogs, and dogs are dirty no matter what. So there's only like a certain amount of clean that I can pretty much always be. So that's where I try to like level it out.
So here's my compromise to it.
Okay.
Something I reason with. Kaya will not get on board with me, which is why I can't do it yet. But I've explained to her that if you want to wear something on your feet in your house, a good compromise is having a pair of house slippers.
Joshua got me a pair for Christmas. I will say Zero has eaten the last 2 pairs I've had.
Mhm.
But Zero is my dog, just to clarify, not a child. She is a dog. But yes, she has eaten my last 2 pairs that I've had. She never eats anything. I don't know why my slippers have been the target of her tormenting for the past year, but we'll see how long these last. I'll keep you updated.
Probably don't last long.
Probably won't.
I used to have a pair of house slippers, and then I got married, and Kaya said, "No, Nick, this is another example of you acting like an old man. None of that."
Well, Joshua wants to get a nightgown, so like a night
shirt. There are
Like,
some things that elderly people do, or at least tropes that we assign to the elderly, but I think just make perfect sense.
Slippers and a nightgown.
There's something comfy about having your slippers on in the house.
But he wants like a shirt like New Girl has in Jet. Like Jet Nick has in the show New Girl. Have you seen the episode of him with like his night shirt? That's what he wants.
No, I have not. Oh boy.
I will, if I can include a picture in this episode, I will. If I do, it'll come up right here. And if not, then I didn't figure it out. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Survive This Crit. Stay tuned for more episodes upcoming on Nightmare on Elm Street.
And don't forget to smash that like button.